Hello and welcome to the Doublethink Dialogues podcast. So, this episode we're going to be talking about policing in Britain. We have a lot of fun in North America with British police sometimes, with the batons is the way we usually think of them. Over here, having lived over here now, you see a different side, and a lot of different sides, especially lately. One of the things that's become noticeable, I think, with the social movements and social change is the reactions they've had to various protests and seemingly inconsistent reactions. So Black Lives Matter, then we've had Just Stop Oil and the Palestinian protests. And then whenever there's a counter protest, the police seem to come much harder on the counter protest.
Don't forget the oil protests.
Yes, exactly. So what I was wondering, so you actually have a background in military, and you were describing a particular version of armed police force. And then you're a magistrate as well. So do you have so from a common average person perspective of mine, I see this as a very inconsistent policing, but it seems to have some kind of directive behind it. Not necessarily one I agree with, but there seems to be a sort of top-down motivation behind this. Would you agree that that's sort of a reasonable take, or do you see this as some other issues?
Well, I think sometimes you have to take policing out of the whole equation and look what politicians want the police to do and what the general public want the police to do. And sometimes the two don't marry up.
Right. And so that is really the question, I think, because it seems like there's a disconnect between the two, doesn't it?
I can give you a really good example of it. In the 1980s, you may not have lived in the country at the time, but every year at Stonehenge, I had to go away for 6 weeks every June. Miss my wife's birthday, get in trouble for that. And we basically ran around Wiltshire and Hampshire for a thing called the Peace Convoy, which unites about football, the older Forest Green Rangers, whichever they are. He was one of them. He was one of the people on this convoy, and tells everyone how great it was and how wonderful it was and how they changed the world. We followed this thing around for weeks on end, living in substandard standard accommodation, being fed rubbish with people spitting in our food and such things, because that's what we were doing. And I'm now a guardian of the stones at Stonehenge, because I was there the night that they smashed them off and painted them and did all sorts of things. And we were the ones that cleared them off, and Stonehenge gave us free entry for life.
Oh, wow.
Okay. But the example of this was, we were policing them. We weren't hassling them. We were told not to arrest them for drugs, not to arrest them for drugs, not to do this, don't cause any problems, just keep them at hand, look after the local population, be a barrier between the two, and so on and so forth. So we did. And they were all for anarchy, hate the police, hate the government, hate everything. And they were normally middle-aged elderly men with young girls running around them. So you can draw your own conclusions from that. Okay. And every Thursday, we stood back when the benefits boss came to give them all their benefits. So week after week in the newspapers, because one thing we did get was we'd drive into the little villages and work around. We'd pick up the newspapers. Then every day it was, the police must do something about this. They've got to sort these people out. They can't have this anarchy in this country. We must sort them out. So there's a thing called the beam shield. There's a very good folk song about it, which is Total Lies. And if you ever look it up, you'll find out why. It's called the beam shield. Look it up. And what happened was the police decided that enough had been enough. That this convoy had to be broken up because it just caused mayhem in these counties. So I was actually on night shift, so I missed the actual thing that happened. And what happened was they got them all into a field and basically got them all in buses and said, that's the end of it. Got people, told the buses and vans away and taken them away and whatever. Following in the newspapers, police brutality.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Doing exactly what they were asking for the day before. I actually did it. Police were in the wrong. And that's how life has been ever since. Police do something to solve a problem, and then they're in the wrong. They don't do something, they're in the wrong.
Right. Presumably that was the same papers as well. So they just want
Daily Mail.
They just want the headlines, don't they?
Daily Mail, Daily Express. I'll give you another example of the newspapers. Policing Molesworth, which is where the cruise missiles were. And one of the jobs we had to do was walk on the fence. If there's any else we wanted, because what they kept doing was cutting it and destroying things and doing general nuisance. Well, that was fine. Again, told not to arrest them, leave them alone, let them work. Walking around the fence, and we're talking to these two teachers, because we found out they were teachers, and chatting away. And the lad who was walking around with me, he wasn't a social science graduate. He actually had a pharmacy degree and had been a pharmacist, but he decided he wanted a bit of adventure, so he joined that job. And we were walking around the fence together, and we used to buy the Guardian between each other. And that was the paper we always got. And we were sitting there reading it. We used to take a bit of stick reading the Guardian. And we walked around the fence. There'd been an article that day, and we mentioned this to these two people. They were chatting away about this article. I can't remember what it was about, but something in society, something really bad, quite left wing. We were chatting quite heavily with them. And we reached the point where we said, right, we've got to go now. Hand you over to our colleagues. And they said, oh, hope your wife and children die of cancer very, very soon.
Yeah.
And that was sort of, you've got to take things like that. You've got to take people spitting in your face, you have to take it. Because if you hit them back, then you were in court. It's very difficult to police under those strict regimes. And I think it's changed slightly, because I think the police now are a touch more aggressive. And when you see them on TV, they look like spacemen with their helmets on the knee things. All we had was helmets only if two people got hurt first. We had two people injured before we could put helmets on. But we had flat caps.
Okay.
And by the end, we had knee protectors. Both my knees are shot. I can't see it because of that, but both my knees are shot. And we'd put our helmets on after that time and take shields out as it got too bad. Now, they go straight to their tasers, to their sprays, their long sticks. We only had a 12-inch pattern. That's what we used to say. People used to say that.
Yeah.
We had a 12-inch pattern. And they're now overly aggressive and look overly aggressive. Go back to me being in court. First time I noticed this was the chief constable also arrested somebody and ended up in court. And she had to come and give evidence to the person who's not guilty. He said, Chief Constable can't arrest. The solicitors tried to play this one up and press for all there. And she turned up and she looked like something that was about to go into action. She had a sweater on, she had all the gear on, the trousers, all the stuff around her waist. And basically said to the clerk, but she allowed to wear that in court. He said, that's an old dress these days.
Okay.
Well, I'd expect someone to come in there, proper jacket and
and
it came quite a shock. But even when they went to court, they didn't put the dress uniform on anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess there was recently an attack in the U.S. On a magistrate judge. One of the criminal is being sentenced just jumped over the bench and attacked her. But I was wondering, so. You say they seem more aggressive, and in some cases they are, but they also seem to stand off a lot in certain protests. I think Black Lives Matter was more or less.
They get involved.
Yeah, exactly. And they just.
Because they will be blamed whatever happens. I was on duty tonight at the Tottenham riots when one of the policemen got killed. And I was due to go in with my firearms. The firearms that I worked in central London were told, get your gear, you're going in. It didn't happen because when that policeman was killed, they backed off. But the problem was, there's white policemen, black protesters.
Right.
And they made it a no-go area. Totally no-go area, no one go in there and do whatever. They didn't like my force because we didn't stand by the same rules as the Home Office forces. We were probably slightly more aggressive.
Right.
Because they were armed anyway. But that was quite frightening because we could hear it when we were now building in central London. We could hear the noise all the way away. It must have been a quick 5 miles away.
Jeez.
And it was absolutely horrendous at night.
So if they're going to be blamed in either case, why not do what is, let's say, quotes, right? Or is that not so obvious?
Well, if you've got the backing of your higher-ups, include the senior officers and the politicians, that would be fine. But as soon as something happens, they all back away.
Right,
okay. Disappear. we got to... when the Brazilian got shot in London.
Right.
I don't know if you know who was involved in that.
I probably heard, but I don't remember.
The gold commander, that was the chief constable, the commissioner of police who just left the room to commissioner of police. She was the gold commander. And she totally basically cocked it up. She was the one who made it to them, fire when you're ready.
Right.
So they killed the person. It turns out he was Brazilian. He wasn't there to drop bombs or anything. Just wrong place, wrong time. ran away rather than stand still and put all his hands up.
Yeah.
People who shot him, I don't know what force they were from or whether they were SAS or SPS, but they were under direct control of this chief constable, or deputy commissioner she was at the time. So what did they do? They didn't have an inquiry into her. She got moved to the Home Office in a senior job. They had an inquiry into 2 people who did the shooting.
Yeah, you always feel
who got hung out to dry.
the top people fail upwards, don't they?
Yes. And I would say eventually, but she came in commissioner. She made a right big deal of it.
Yeah.
And my wife will tell you, every time I used to see on television, I used to rant. Basically rant.
So do you think the top is now then acting under plausible deniability? Basically, they don't do anything in case they get put in the room. So what I wonder then is, so a lot of, like mentioned, Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of narrative around that's built up now, and some of the narrative I think is very harmful, which is mostly in the U.S., not so much here, but I think it still exists here, which is the idea, the idea that the police are shooting just randomly Black people, which statistically isn't true, obviously. But does that narrative make policing more difficult as well then? Because do you think that this is having an effect as a general attitude in society, in certain societies anyway, and then they will react negatively towards the police regardless of what happens?
You will always react negatively towards the police, whatever happens.
Okay.
But the police officer who has got the firearm, and actually carried one for over 10 years, has to make a decision in a fraction of a second of whether they fire their weapon or even if they pull the weapon, because as soon as you pull your weapon, you're suspended till you clear yourself.
Right, okay.
If you fire your weapon, you're suspended for the next 2 years, basically, till you clear the courts, because you will always end up in court. And you know that when you take the job on.
Right, okay.
But with the Black Lives Matter ones and whatever, so you jump in front of a car that you know they've got information person. This is where the gold commander comes in. They give you the information. They're gold, silver, and bronze is you, basically. The gold and silver are giving you the information that you need for doing the job you're doing. And they've told you the firearm in the car and the person has used it before. And you jump on the bonnet, and there's a black person sitting in the seat. Do you shoot or do you not?
Yeah, difficult choice. Yeah,
very fraction of a second choice, and some people have, and some people haven't.
Right. And I suppose, especially because if you see some of the cases, well, the most notable ones in the U.S., where you think, well, he was in a difficult circumstance. It's okay. Let's say George Floyd. Let's go there. And there's a lot of stories around this whole thing, but you can argue that he didn't inherently, and I've heard other police officers say this from the U.S., saying he didn't necessarily do anything wrong. He just failed to notice certain symptoms. I mean, he was under a lot of stress, the officer, because basically there's a crowd watching him. He's a white guy trying to arrest a big black guy. The black guy was hyped up on lethal doses of drugs, and the officer was distracted enough that he failed to notice the symptoms that were setting in.
We just had one in North Yorkshire, the holiday camp, with a security guard sat in someone's back for the best part of an hour.
Oh, wow.
And he died.
Right.
And they just had the post, they had the coroner's call this week. And he probably never was taught techniques of how to restrain someone. Whereas the police officer in George Floyd's case would have been taught those techniques, and he should have used them. And kneeling on the neck is no technique I've ever been learned, even in the military. You know, if you want to kill someone, kneel on the neck, you know. I can tell you other pressure points where you want to kill somebody, but you wouldn't do it to someone even as a hyped up until they run away. You lose them. So what? You know, doesn't matter, does it, in the big picture? You know, as soon as you cuff them, you can't, you know, you cuff them behind the back, you're restraining the legs, what are they going to do to you?
Yeah. So the officer I heard in the U.S. suggested this was a technique they're taught over there. Yeah.
And it shouldn't be.
But this brings up another issue, because you say once you cuff them. So there was another case recently, I think there was a video that went around of it was actually 4 female officers trying to cuff one guy, and they failed, and he eventually just like walked away effectively. So that brings to mind then, I guess, the training of modern police forces, and I this was in the U.S. as well again. So this is the whole diversity and inclusion issue, which is, I think, affecting a lot of industries. And I won't even go into the airplane industry in the U.S., which is a mess right now. But are you aware of of this having any effects? Have they changed the training systems? Or do you feel confident that the British system is still the same as it was, if not,
Well, the British
if it's not
system
good?
has been tweaked. I mean, they use kettling now to put groups together to stop them going into a mob, which again, have been told by the UN they shouldn't be doing these things. But, it does stop people getting hurt. So is a good tactic or isn't a good tactic. But if you want to say India, or I'll go back to when I first learned right control in the Navy. We did what was called the colonial version. And I don't know if you've ever seen the old films like the Zulus and things like that. When they have a riot and the military march in.
Right.
And the front row's got shields and big sticks, and the back row's got rifles.
Yeah.
And that's what we were taught. And my job was to go and fill the banner and say, "This is the right, disperse or we fire."
Yeah.
So we've gone back from those days.
Definitely, yes.
1970s.
Okay, not that long ago.
We moved on to shields and helmets, and you don't take firearms with you. Now we seem to be going
too far, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe we've gone the full circle.
Yeah.
Go back to disperse or we fire. I mean, some parts of the world you don't.
But it doesn't seem to be consistent. I think. Do you think that? I mean, because so the Just Stop Oil, for example, they were allowed to go on forever before the police started doing anything. It seems, anyway.
I've demonstrated some demonstrations where people chain themselves together, put their arms through the pipes, and sit on the middle of the road, and had to move them for their own safety most of the time.
Well, right, yeah.
Because that's how they do it, and it's very difficult. It takes a lot of manpower. And then you move them to the side of the road to stand up and walk back on it again.
Yeah.
Over and over again. After the 8 hours of doing that, you're pretty tired and getting a bit short-tempered, which is why mistakes happen. But what harm was he doing to the environment by sitting there? Oh, because all the car engines are running and destroying the environment.
Yeah.
They want to glue themselves to stop tube trains which are on electricity, which would take the cars off the road. What was their goal?
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue, isn't it? Yeah. What was the goal of these? I could give them some useful things to do, but not they weren't doing anything.
Go stand outside the refinery, though. Go to sea and sit on a tanker or something.
Yeah. Stop the bombs. Yeah. But so why do you think it took the police? So was it just? I mean, because eventually the public started moving them themselves.
That's why they had to get involved.
Yeah. So do you think? I mean, what was the point? Why didn't the police start removing the Just Stop Oil earlier? Then do you think it was just manpower, or?
Oh no, very middle class protests, weren't they? They were school teachers, they were professors, they were this and that and whatever else. Every lockdown, the agenda was sitting out there. They hadn't thought it through totally. Their politics. They decided, and the police done anything to them. They've been lawyering up quicker than that. You've got a target on your back. You're the one who's in court to explain yourself.
Right.
So you got suspended from your job for doing the job.
Right. So do you think? That's another issue as well, isn't it? The sort of negative feedback loops we give with police officers. But do you think then that was a serious consideration was the fact? Well, Just Stop Oil we know was funded by millionaires or a millionaire.
Forrest Green funded a lot of it.
Yeah, so he picked the weirdest people to be in his movement for sure. But do you think they kind of just waited until the public got fed up and would act themselves, and so they had a mandate, or
what they wanted was the politicians to say get on with it.
Right. So they were just waiting, you think?
And the only way the politicians say get on with it when people start taking the law into their own hands and getting arrested for attacking these people, then it gives you the mandate, doesn't it, to go and do whatever you need to actually do.
Right.
They haven't stopped the Stop Oil, they just stopped the TV, stopped covering it.
Right, yeah.
It's still happening. When you get actresses that set a standard of old and tell everyone they should be stopping oil in the middle of the Foxton Circus, was it? When she's flown first class from the States to be.
Yeah.
You think,
none of it makes sense.
It doesn't make sense. And of course, they didn't arrest her because imagine the fuss.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, why does it take so long for the up higher, or the top people, why does it take so long for them to make a decision on this and to filter this down? Do they have an agenda on it themselves? Do they want to not take responsibility? And in which case, do we have the wrong people in those positions?
I worked in Whitehall long enough to know what a bad Monday means. Do you know what a bad Monday is?
Not particular.
Well, what they do is they wait for the weekend for something really serious to happen in the country or the world. Then they bring the bad news out from the politicians, and it's covered on the news after all this other events. So this Israeli conflict or the Ukrainian conflict is covered long before we're cutting benefits.
Okay. So it covers up
sometimes quite happy to let these things go on because it covers what
as a distraction.
You said on one of your other podcasts about the COVID. Lots of things were hidden. Were brought in. Some of our civil rights were taken away under COVID, and not a word was said about it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us were talking about it individually, but there was no official discussion of that, really.
And no parties picked it up.
Yeah.
The Green Party said a little bit, and they did try, but they got one. Then we come down to why haven't got proportional representation.
Yeah.
They've got one MP, where it's if we had proportional representation, no one would have a majority.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things, and we're getting slightly off topic, but that's fine. I think one of the biggest things in COVID was, and not just in the UK, of course, in Canada, I noticed it as well, just the absolute absence of an opposition party, like a functional opposition party to challenge what was going on. They just all seemed to disappear as soon as they had to take a stand on anything.
They got lazy, didn't they?
Yeah, lazy, hiding from responsibility, maybe not wanting to take a stand. Yeah.
Well, the first day I heard COVID starting to get serious, I said, "What we should have is like the war of coalition government now, or at least the cabinet should be coalition, and the leaders of the other parties should all be in there together.
Yeah, it should be
a decision together." Of course, it never happened.
No, in fact, it went worse because from what I've heard, what was this in State of Fear by Laura Dodson, I think. Suggests that for example, the SAGE, the scientific advisory groups, etc., they were multi-partisan, but because certain groups were stronger than others, they sort of ended up pushing out the voices of reason and balance, shall we say, and they ended up becoming echo chambers themselves. And so instead of being, like you suggest, this coalition of multiple ideas and perspectives on how to move forward, they just become echo chambers with their own goals and directions.
It was all sound bites, wasn't it?
It was in the end, yeah.
It was sound bites. We're doing this to save you. No, you're doing this to save money some of the time.
Most of the time these days, probably. Save money or make money for themselves and their friends on the side. Yeah.
Well, as it turned out, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah. Well, it's happening again too with all the wars too, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'd say I was involved both when I worked for British Land and in the Navy with things that happened in the wars and things and procurement of military stuff. That's absolutely disgusting what goes on.
Yeah. Is it a surprise given that the people who rise to these positions, I mean, presumably want some position of power, whatever the reason for getting there, it's someone who seeks power, so they're going to use it. And sometimes maybe not even directly corruptly. So here's an example. This might be, it's too long ago to make a difference. But so during COVID, in the early parts of COVID, so my wife's a doctor. She was at the hospital all the time, regularly working there. But you were allowed only to go out, for a walk and a minimal amount of time, right? So my wife would come home and then she'd be like, "Oh, I have to drive over to my friend's house to bring them some stuff. And then I'm going to go for my walk. And then I'm going to get," and I'm like, "We're only supposed to be out once." But you see, so she didn't think of it as violating the instructions because she was helping, let's say bringing food or something to one of her friends. And then she would do all these other things. And I'm like, single-handedly, okay, she never had COVID. She's never had COVID, but single-handedly, you could argue if you had got COVID, she could be spreading it to everyone in the community, right? So but it's the point of, she wasn't intentionally violating anything, and she was doing it for what she thought was good purposes, right? Even though she was directly violating the regulations at the time. And so what I wonder is, do some, at least in some cases, do people in power do the same kind of thing, right? Do they have in their thoughts, this would be from our perspective, oh, the rules don't apply to me when I'm in those positions, right? So do they have the thought, well, I'm doing this for a greater purpose, so in fact, the rule doesn't apply to me in this case? Do you think that could be a significant part of it?
All I would say is probably schoolboys playing games.
So you're going with the corruption angle.
Oh no, I've been involved with the higher ups in British politics, the higher ups in the Navy, the higher ups in the police, and they've all come from the same backgrounds. They've all been to the same schools,
Right.
they've all been in the same dorms, they all know each other before they get into these things. It's just like a big club.
Yeah.
Majority of the population are excluded from this club.
That's true. Yeah.
They make the rules, but they don't have to adhere to them because they've always been above the rules. And I include our poor family in this because they are the worst offenders for this.
Sure.
The rules are for everybody else, not for them.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, I do agree with that from those people for sure. I remember watching one of the parliamentary debates at one point where it was getting out of hand, and it actually looked like it was a game, like to the House Speaker even, and they were all like smiling, and it was all behave, you guys, and it was just like a rowdy dorm room or something that they just try to quiet down so they don't disturb the neighbors.
I don't know if you've ever visited Westminster.
You have been, yeah.
No, have you ever been?
I have, yeah.
Even in the bar.
Trying to remember now. I just did it recently too, but it was a bit of a whirlwind.
The bar, and there they are, all are together drinking as good mates.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, you put each other apart.
Right.
And then after the finish, they're going over another 10 pints. Then drive home.
Yeah.
You know, because the law of driver rules don't apply to them either.
That's true. Yeah, that's too common as well. Yeah. No, definitely. I don't know. I guess is it better or worse that they're mates in those situations? Because if they hated each other, I don't know. I feel like we'd end up where the U.S. is right now in many cases, where it seems clear that there are segments of the American government that absolutely despise other segments to the point where they want to actively destroy them. Now here is the opposite. When you say it's like a big game basically for them, which makes it feel like to us at least that they're not taking it seriously and they're just trying to win points in their particular topics or preferences.
Of our laws go through on the nod.
Right.
There's only 30% that are contested. That's through the Commons.
Right.
And that comes straight from my degree.
Yeah.
It may be slightly less these days, but it was 70% just went through.
But it's probably slightly more than 70% nowadays, I suspect.
Yeah. But and then they're all shouting, we didn't ask the Commons first before they dropped the bombs on Yemen. Well, you got to think of the people who dropped the bombs. They've knocked out of the sky.
Yeah.
There's something about don't tell your enemy what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
You know.
No, there are certain decisions that you need to. Well, you wish you could trust the government with properly. Yeah. You need to be able to. That doesn't mean we can. But yeah, you can't do referendums on everything, can you? Yeah. But so going back to policing then, since we're drawing sort of towards the end of the episode, is it broken? If it is broken, how would you fix it? And if it's not broken, how do you change public perception of it?
I'd make policing less reactive, because now it's all reactive rather than proactive. They need to get more out on the streets. They need to be more seen by the public. They need to investigate the smaller crimes which affect the lower echelon of the thing. The reason people at the lowest level hate the police is because they don't do the basic jobs.
Right.
They get robbed or they get mugged or their house gets broken into. The police say, I'm like, claim on your insurance. I've been told that myself and I did not. The person who told me that. I said, do you realise who you're talking to? And she said, why? I said, well, let's do this. Person's committed a crime and you've got to investigate it. Oh, we don't have to. When I talked to the superintendent, he decided to investigate it.
Yeah, exactly. No, we had our own situation as well in one of the previous places we lived where we had a couple of hoodlums throwing big stones through our windows, and they did it seven times in the same month. In fact, one time, and these are like fist-sized stones.
It could kill you.
Yeah, and especially because my wife was holding our 2-year-old daughter at the time. Actually, no, she was younger than 2. She's about 1-year-old, and narrowly missed her. Right, so there could have been serious injuries there. In fact, that was the time I chased them around the neighborhood. But the point being,
it would put you in the wrong.
Yeah, it would if I did something to them. Yeah. So we called. I mean, the first time it happened, we called the police, and they sent around people, and they sat in a car outside for the next night and didn't see anything. Then they went home, and then a week later it happened again, and we called them, and then we called them a couple times, and when we called them this final time when they had the really dangerous one, And no one showed up. And we said, like, look, we can give you a description. We know exactly where they're standing right now outside. And no one even showed up that time. They just, like, after the first time, they weren't interested. And this is, I agree, completely, exactly right. Everyone will say the same thing, is they don't seem for some reason to be interested in any of the crimes that the average person is concerned with.
Well, I haven't sat with a magistrate, especially I did most of my time in the youth court. If you didn't stomp down on them the first time they did something wrong, you would see them for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Until eventually it got to the point where you had to send them to prison.
Yeah.
Which I saw quite a few from this estate going through that system. And the cases came out. My house was it egged? Our garage was brought into, and all the food out the freezer thrown all over the place. It was purely personal. But the police, again, didn't want to know. That's your problem. Claim on insurance. It is not the answer. It's catch the person who's doing it, punish them for what they've done, and they might think twice about doing it again. You let them do it once, and they get away with it, and do worse the second time, do even worse the third time.
So I suspect we don't want to go too far down this one because it'll open up a lot of can of worms. But have we gotten too soft on the criminals then in the modern era?
Too soft and some,
not hard enough on the others. Yeah, I suppose that's fair enough. Depends on which part of the strata you're in, right?
I mean, economic crimes. I mean,
yeah,
you're never going to get to the bottom of them because they're too clever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And,
well, they built the system, didn't they? In many cases.
yeah.
Yeah.
They built the computers that they're using to defraud people.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, we should probably end. Otherwise, we'll go down some more rabbit holes and be here for another hour. So
maybe you can find a rabbit hole in the future.
Yes, exactly. So that's about all we have for this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed, please share, like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Doublethink Dialogues, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.